Housekeepers of Reddit, what is the craziest or most not safe for work thing you've walked in on in a hotel or at a client's house? So, I was the manager of a crappy extended stay hotel years ago. The housekeepers liked to call me in to witness unusual findings. One guest had left a couple of potatoes with condoms on them under the bed. I guess it was overall harmless, but not sure how potatoes were the winner of phallic vegetable shopping options. Next story. I worked as a day porter in a very mediocre hotel. One day, a couple were late to check out, so the receptionist sent me to go and knock on their door and ask them to leave. I knocked at the door for about 5 minutes to dead silence. At first, I thought nothing of it, went down and told the reception that there was no answer, and to try the phone again. The receptionist was pretty pissed and told me I had to go and unlock the door because they weren't answering. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like opening locked doors unless I know I'm meant to be there. So I go upstairs and I knock again, and I call out that I'm about to enter. I open the room and find what is the largest amount of leftover drugs I'd ever expected to see. There were lines on the dressers, syringes on the ground, and some weed lying around. From the door, I couldn't see the bed, and my heart was effing pounding, expecting to see a dead or dying junkie. And slowly, I crept forward, literally battling my thundering heart and common sense every step. After all, what are leftover drugs? No one leaves behind drugs. It wasn't a long way to the bed, but as I said, I literally moved like a snail. A really frightened snail. When I finally came past the bathroom door and could see the bed, there was no one in it. I checked the rest of the room to make sure there was no body in the bath, etc., but that was it. Just drugs. There were other funny/unexpected nights and mornings in that hotel, but this one takes the cake of craziest housekeeping find. I would just like everybody to notice that OP didn't tell us what they did with the drugs. You know, somebody swooped in there and tried to make a quick buck, didn't know any people, and then just consumed it all themselves. You know what? Just get high on your own supply, literally. Anyway, next story. So, I worked in a cinema during the school holidays. A couple of the full-time guys were telling me stories of finding dead bodies in screens. I laughed and told them off for being wind-up merchants. So, I then went to clean after rush hour 3. The end credit music is blaring and there's an old lady sat there on her own. Loads of people were slow to leave screens thanks to Pirates of the Caribbean and Marvel, so I just stood at the back, hiding my cleaning supplies behind me, waiting for her to leave. Then the credits were over, and the Between Films music started, and she still wasn't moving. I pushed myself as far over in the aisle as I could, and it's an old cinema, the aisle wasn't wide, I was edging down it, and I looked at her for a while to be sure she was breathing before I reached out to wake her up. Scared the crap out of me when she did jump. Next story. Does third shift room service at a casino hotel count? People walking the hallways bare naked at 4 a.m., lots of topless cougars wanting to impress. The worst is the post-sex smell that some couples have. I'm not going into details on that one. Next story. I worked in a pretty crappy Nights Inn hotel, but we always kept it incredibly clean. This was also my first housekeeping gig. A month or two into the job, thinking I'd seen it all, we had a couple that was refusing to leave even though the room was already reserved out. It escalated, and I was sent to go open up the room in an attempt to get them to leave without calling the police. I banged on the door for a good 5 minutes, yelling housekeeping, and then proceeded to open up the door. They had ripped the bed frame that was bolted onto the wall off and moved in by the window, and were effing hard. I noticed how thrashed and trashed the room was immediately, but I yelled sorry and ran out. And I worked with some pretty hardcore women, so once I told the head housekeeper, I'm pretty sure she threatened to kick the guy's ass and demanded the money for the damages that she hadn't even seen yet. And then they finally left. But this is where the crap show began. We walked into the room and there were needles, dog collars, I'm assuming they were using it for makeshift tourniquets, cottage cheese, and chicken wing bones everywhere. We had to trash everything in the room, including appliances. I have never been so horrified before. When I say cottage cheese, it was a huge tub that was smeared over everything and clumped in the floor. There was also chicken bones in the bed that I had just caught them effing in, and hot sauce smeared all over the walls. The more we cleaned, we eventually found more drug paraphernalia wrapped up in the sheets, drug spoons, and children's books and toys. I'm so thankful that I didn't get poked by a needle. Next story. Was a manager in a 3-star hotel. We had found some guests that had overstayed checkout by 3 hours, asked them to leave, and had to come back again to tell them that they had to get out. The final time I came to check in on them, I just walked in because I was sick of it. And she was on her knees, sucking him off, and just looked around at me. I held the door wide open, told them to get out, and that I'd call the police if they didn't. Neither seemed bothered though, just a bit disappointed that I'd interrupted them. Next story. So I work as a dorm keeper at my college, and normally I only clean a few of the female floors because, well, I'm a female. So one day, the people who were supposed to clean the boys' floors just didn't show up. Our boss asked if anyone wanted to make some extra money, and since I'm a broke college kid, my hand went straight up. We got sent off to the floors to clean, and I'm a few rooms in, and everything had been going perfectly fine. I get to this room, and this kid pokes in his head out from across the hall and goes, "Hey, good luck," and then goes back into his room. At this point, I'm just thinking, yeah, whatever, let's do this. And I open the door, and I feel so bad for whoever is going to marry this boy because, first of all, the room smelled like crap, like actual feces. I gagged and stepped out for a second before covering my mouth and then going back in. The room was covered in clothes, old food, books, papers. Basically, you name it, it was there. So I start cleaning, and I get halfway through and notice this absolutely rancid smell coming from a drawer and open it up, and this kid had a dead rabbit just sitting in his drawer. I pulled the poor thing out and stuck it in the trash bag and moved to the next drawer and found a bunch of old syringes and bags that clearly held drugs. At this point, I'm dreading opening the third drawer, but for some reason, I do it anyways, and this one is full of sex toys. Not the normal stuff, but bondage material, an adult content book specifically for people with a foot fetish. And this man had a bag of literal crap in his drawer. And that's when I dropped everything and ran. Like straight up sprinted out of that room. I went to the manager, told him everything, and that kid got kicked out of our school the very next day. I also learned that the kid that had wished me luck was the previous roommate of that kid and had moved rooms to get away from that room. I quit cleaning rooms after that. Next story. My wife used to work at a Marriott Residence Inn, so long and short-term guests as a housekeeper. I asked her what her worst stories were. One was where she did her knock housekeeping 2 or 3 times, then with no answer, let herself into the room. And there was a Chinese man in there self-pleasuring to Latina adult content. Then the other one I remember her telling me way back in the day was a room where when she went into the bathroom and there was crap everywhere except where it was supposed to be. The walls, the floors, the tub, the sink, but not in the toilet. They left an apology note and a giant tip, like a $40 tip. She would often get tips in the forms of food and liquor or beer. Anytime they left weed, she turned it in because you never know when the bosses were trying to set someone up. Next story. Used to work front desk at a hotel, but did some housekeeping with minor things on nights when we were busy. One night, this couple checked in and then left after about 4 hours. I went in with housekeeping to see if I could help at all, and as soon as I walk in, I see about 10 used condoms and a large bottle of lube on the bedside table. It's definitely not the worst thing in this thread, but it wasn't a pleasant cleanup for the housekeeping, I'm sure. Next story. I am a housekeeper at a hospital for the midnight shift. A few days before last Christmas, I get a call to come to the ER immediately. A 24-year-old woman positive for hepatitis A had crap everywhere and was being discharged. Her feces did not look normal at all. I'm talking bright yellow and orange-looking crap that assaulted my nose as soon as I walked in. But whatever, I smear some minty toothpaste in my mask, double glove and gown up to bleach the entire room. Before I can start, however, the same patient is wheeled back in and is very still and looking very pale. The doctor and nurses look at her and see that she is not breathing, and they call a code blue. The hospital I work at is small, and I'm friendly with a lot of the staff, so it doesn't take but a few minutes to be told quietly by the radiologist that she had inhaled some heroin that she had hid as she was being wheeled out of the hospital. The poor woman was wheeled over to trauma not too far away from her original room, and since the ER only has a few rooms, I could hear the whole nursing staff trying to revive her as I bleached and stripped down the infected exam room. I just wanted to incinerate the linen and the curtains when I was done. I knew all hope for the patient was lost, though, when I saw her parents wailing by the trauma room and a priest holding a bottle of holy water walked through the door at 3 in the morning. The mortician was called to collect the body, and I spent the rest of the shift dousing the trauma room with 3 bottles of bleach while trying my best to ignore the anguished cries of the girl's relatives. I then went home, scrubbed myself in the shower, and threw my clothes in the washer 3 times and slept like a rock after that. Good times. Next story. Not a housekeeper, but worked as a maintenance guy at a hotel. I was one of the few people who knew how to fix the hot tub and AC units. I was also the only one dumb enough to answer my phone at 3 a.m. to fix things. There was only one time this ever worked in my favor, though. We had a college basketball, volleyball tournament in town. The hot tub died and they couldn't get it started again, so they tried calling the boss. No answer. Then they tried calling the head of maintenance. No answer. Then they called me. I answered. I was at the bar. So I leave the bar and drive to work to see what the hell is wrong with it this time. I go in expecting the usual old people and soccer moms. What I wasn't expecting was to find 3 all-female teams in my pool rooms dressed in skimpy bikinis, and some didn't even have tops on. In hindsight, I'm positive this was because the coaches were at the bar I just came from, and the front desk guy definitely wasn't going to say anything. Unfortunately, though, the hot tub fix was only like a 5-minute problem. The breaker tripped in the boiler room. Next story. I worked in a hotel around 14 years ago. I was walking towards work one morning when I saw about 5 police cars outside. I was taking over as shift manager, so went straight over to see the manager that should have been leaving. Basically, a guy I had checked in the day before, who seemed completely normal, had gone bat crap crazy in his room with an axe, smashed up the TV, walls, the bathroom door, absolute chaos. He thought there was a tactical police force abseiling down the hotel walls outside his window to take him away. I left the job and never found out if it was a drug-related episode or a psychotic break. Next story. While it is not housekeeping, my mother works as a criminal detective for the police and my sister is a paramedic, so they do enter other homes from time to time. They had some really effed up stories to tell. My sister once ran into a crap ton of weapons, which are illegal in Germany, that were in the apartment, and there was also drugs. She tried to give nearby police sort of a hint that maybe they want to look into that apartment, but they were too dense to do so, and she couldn't state anything because of NDAs and stuff. Then my mother once got into an apartment with a 3-week-old corpse that was halfway eaten by worms. They were actually called because crap was dripping into the apartment below. Or also once, an apartment which was covered several centimeters high in feces. She said her colleagues wanted to close it, but she went in, and the person in there actually still lived. And then one time, my sister ran into a dismembered grandmother. I believe they were called because blood was coming out of the door. Next story. A blood-soaked bed in one of the suites. Like, more than we can reasonably pass off as menstrual blood. The boss made one of the ladies clean it up while the rest of us started the rooms on the second floor. At one point, I looked out of the windows to see the parking lot below, and there was a large, dark red puddle just behind someone's parked Camry. I brought the boss to look into it, and she decided to step out to investigate, but told me to get back to work. She refused to talk about it for the rest of the day. Not sure what came of the situation since I quit shortly after. Next story. Worked at a ski hotel one time, and it was a very family-oriented, wholesome hotel. Sure, you could come to party, but usually they would stay at other hotels or apartments. And that is why it was so weird when we found a turd on the floor. And when I say floor, I mean carpeted floor. What was especially strange was that it was underneath the beds, so they would have had to have removed the beds, taken a crap, and then put the beds back. And there was nothing wrong with the toilet. Next story. Not the housekeeper exactly, but was doing the laundry. Often received towels and sheets covered in crap and blood. One night, I get a call that there was a fight on the 4th floor. I call up the cops and ask for assistance for a fight happening at our hotel. Elevator is slow and stairs are right next to it, so I sprint up all of the stairs, and at the top landing is a puddle of blood. Someone was definitely stabbed. I cautiously open the door expecting to find a murder in progress, but a woman is sitting on the floor in front of the door, her face and hair covered in blood and piss in her pants. An angry man is standing over her. I swore I had just found a man savagely beating the crap out of his girlfriend. I smell booze from both of them, and I calmly command the guy, "You need to go to your room." And I expected resistance, and I was ready for a fight with the guy if he went after her again. But instead, he shrugs and says, "Okay," and goes to his room. He pauses as he's opening the door. "You'll take care of her, right?" And I cautiously nod, "Yeah, I'll make sure she's okay." But a wise bar owner once told me to separate drunk people ASAP or they can just keep going. This lady then gets to her feet and is smearing her blood handprints all over the walls. I take her by her bloody hand and lead her to the elevator. I tell her the cops are on their way and that she needs to report her boyfriend for beating her. And then she freaks out. I didn't understand, I just thought she was drunk and stupid. Then the cops show up, talk to her, talk to the guy, and then the facts come out, and I am so glad I stayed calm and didn't go after the boyfriend. This dumb B-word got wasted at a nearby bar, tripped, and busted her lip on a curb, and kept wiping her hands across her face to smooth her back while cussing him out and slapping at him. The fight was her screaming at him and then spitting blood in his face. He pushed her back to create distance and she fell on her rump. Then I walked in. Yay. Next story. My friend was an RA at a college. The dorm she was at or whatever had suite-style rooms, so like a living room, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms which could be locked. Well, one kid had been complaining about the smell from his roommate's room but hadn't seen him in like a week to confront him about it. But they didn't have similar schedules or friend groups, so it didn't raise an alarm. Eventually, like Thursday, he called the RA to check it out. And as you can probably guess, the roommate was dead in the other room for like a week. They think he died of a drug overdose like the previous Friday or Saturday. Next story. I own and work at a small motel and rent a couple trailer houses that are on the property in the middle of nowhere. Have quite a few, not sure how many are truly not safe for work, but quite a few of the stories are just odd. The one that would probably be the most interesting was when we had a couple come stay for like 2 or 3 weeks. You've never seen them though go out of their room. If you did, it was always the woman. Anyway, one day I went out to the shop/storage shed to get the mower out to go mow, and I came down the track of the motel and stop as I see a U.S. Marshal standing at the back of the motel, fully geared up with his vest and an M4 ready, and he just waves me off. I go, okay, stop the mower and go around to the front and see 2 unmarked large SUVs sitting in the driveway down by the house, both with undercover cops in it. I go inside wondering what the deal is, and after a bit they catch the woman coming out and storm in the room. Turns out the couple were some big-time meth makers, and that the police had found them. They had been either making it or just about to start making some when the cops showed up, and I'm glad they did because that crap can easily burn a place down. It was definitely an interesting day. Next story. I've got 2. When I first got into the hospital industry, I worked at a very low-end hotel that was on the verge of collapsing. The property management company was planning on tearing it down, but wanted to squeeze every ounce out of it first. And this place, it saw a lot of corporate/contract guests. One week, we had a group of contractors in town who took up our whole first floor, and one evening, a solitary man came back to the hotel early, feeling exhausted and ill. In the morning, when the crew came to breakfast, the single man from the night before was not around, and his crew assumed he overslept. At the front desk, we attempted several wake-up calls and ultimately were asked to make sure he was okay, as he had been feeling ill the night before, by knocking on the door/entering his room. Well, after several knocks, I had to resort to opening his door, and inside, I found a very dead contractor lying in his bed, the most awful shade of pale that I had ever seen. Then, a few years later, I was an AGM of a luxury property in Virginia, and we had a group of people who had assembled a meth lab in one of our suites. Didn't find that one out until the SWAT team showed up and busted them. Good times. Love hospitality. Okay, so we've got U.S. Marshals, we just got a SWAT team. Do you guys think FBI or CIA will make an appearance in this video? Place your bets now. I don't feel like they will, to be honest. I want them to. I don't know if they will, but there will be more law enforcement, I'm willing to bet. But anyway, next story. So, a friend of mine's stepmom cleaned this older couple's house for years. One day, she said the husband was napping in his chair and she didn't want to wake him up, so she quietly cleaned around him. Wife then comes home and it turns out he had died sometime while she was gone running for errands. Kind of really messed my buddy's mom up for a while. Next story. Back in college, I took on a job one summer of cleaning university apartments after the students left for the semester. It was good money, and I got to work with 2 friends, so we usually got each place finished in about 2 hours. One apartment didn't look too bad upon walking in, though. All the furniture was out, which was nice. A lot of students just leave their crappy college stuff behind rather than lug it home. However, though, the bathroom was an effing disaster. Puke everywhere, and old puke. All over the floor and the bottom of the toilet bowl. Like, not in the bowl, but completely crusted onto the back and bottom and the way behind it. Then dried piss everywhere and crap around as well. It's like they never made anything into the toilet. It took me about 2 hours alone to clean their bathroom. The worst part was when I opened up the fridge. There was a dead snake in the bottom drawer. Nothing else in the entire fridge. But the bottom see-through drawer contained a dead black snake that was stiff as a board. Poor baby. Next story. 20 years ago, I worked as a housekeeper in a large bed and breakfast that was situated in a very conservative, small-town community. So, it was big news that a lesbian couple had spent the night in one of the hot tub rooms. Snickers and disgusted comments were flying amongst employees. Some of my coworkers even got upset with me because I didn't see any harm done. But as I was loading a washer, my coworker runs into the laundry room. She was looking rather green and began puking into a large trash can. When her stomach was empty, she told me I would have to clean that room. Well, what I found were candles all around the room, rose petals as well, and body prints on the mirror that was situated behind the hot tub. Not really not safe for work in my eyes, but apparently it was a big deal to everyone else. Okay, be lesbian, walk into a super conservative town, go to a super conservative hotel, scissor and bang and leave rose petals everywhere, refuse to elaborate, leave. Big W for the lesbians today, but anyway, next story. So, I work for a hotel, but I didn't walk in on anybody, but had to go to a housekeeper's place of living because she hadn't been to work in 5 days. After numerous calls to family members, nobody had spoken to her and it was odd. So myself and the hotel's manager went to her apartment to check in on her, and as we got to the location, we found her apartment, and it's next door to the leasing office, and they haven't seen her either. And rent was due, so that was another odd thing. We then knocked like the police on her door several times and no answer. The property maintenance crew showed up and unlocked the door, but it was locked from the inside, so she had to be in there. We then called the police, and as they arrived, they broke the window to her apartment, and we entered through there and found her dead body laying in the middle of her living room on a mattress. She had no other furniture, no TV, no dresser, no nothing. She must have been dead those 5 days she didn't show up to work because the way her body looked and the amount of blood that was on the sheets and what had to run down her mouth and down her neck. She had tissues and tissues of blood around her, and come to find out, she had the flu and possibly had complications from that and had pneumonia. I'll never forget the sight of it, and it still creeps me out to this day. Next story. My buddy used to have a temp job cleaning fraternities here in town for Indiana University. A couple of the frats would purposely trash their place knowing that they wouldn't have to clean it up. He walked in on his first day to a frat house that had smeared feces all over the walls. He sweated through it, but he didn't last long at that job. Next story. I worked on reception at a hotel for 4.5 years, and I saw just about everything there. Nothing shocks me anymore. One of the craziest things I witnessed, though, was a guy walk in who had stayed a few nights before in room 207. He came into reception high as a kite and asking for a room. I told him we were full, and he walked off. A few minutes later, he comes back in saying he'll pay for room 207 again. I turned him away and reminded him that we had no rooms. The reception phone rings not long afterwards, and a housekeeper, who was heavily pregnant at the time, is in a panic as a guy walked into the room she was cleaning and climbed into the bath. I asked her what room she was in, and sure enough, it was room 207. I ran upstairs and into room 207, and the man had the bathroom door barricaded from the inside, and the bath taps running. I told him he had to leave or I would call the police, but he sounded like he was about to pass out. So I called 911, and when they turned up, we were all trying to open the bathroom door. There was no response from this guy now, so we were panicking at this point. We do finally manage to get the door open, though, and there's the man asleep, fully clothed in an overflowing bath full of water. He wakes up suddenly, looks at the police and says, "Could I have some privacy here? I'm having a bath." He was taken away in handcuffs and a towel. Next story. Worked at a 2-star hotel, and two of the weirdest things that happened to me were, one, I had a guest come up with his son and has a box that he found under the bed. It was for a sex toy. Not just any sex toy, it was a large one with realistic privates and a butt. And he didn't bring the toy itself because it was not in the box. So guess who had to go pick it up? I wore 2 sets of gloves. A construction crew had stayed with us for weeks prior. Some dude banged that toy countless times, I'm sure. Then the second craziest thing I had happen, I got multiple complaints about noise from a room. Okay, no big deal. I call them up and ask them to quiet down. That works for a few minutes, but then they continue. This goes on multiple times, even went up and knocked, until I have to call the police for assistance. When the police came, we all went upstairs and they opened the door. There were 20 teenage kids in the room drinking, in a double bedroom with maybe 300 square feet. I got the meanest looks because I ruined their party. But seriously, that many people in that small of a room? Was that a party? Next story. I have my own cleaning service now, but before that I worked for a company in a nearby city. One client we cleaned for was a pediatrician. Her house was icky. We would split up. One person took the kitchen, another the bath, etc. It was my turn to dust, which included changing her sheets and making her bed, which was just a box spring and mattress on the floor. So I'm putting the sheets on when my foot kicked something. I bent to pick it up, but decided I should see what it was first. Thank effing God I did. It was a used butt plug. A very used butt plug. And it was completely covered in crap. Not a little, big globs. Her nightstand drawer was open about 2 inches, and I hadn't noticed right away. Guess what was in there? A whole drawer full of crap-covered butt plugs. No joke. It was so effing disgusting. And no, I did not pick up the one on the floor. Next story. Oh boy, this is the first time I am prepped for these kinds of questions. This ain't from me, but a friend that works as a clerk in a hotel in the UK. First one, an old woman would constantly sneak into the hotel and just stay there until they had to kick her out. When friend went to ask her if she needed help getting home, she told him, "I am already home." She would talk to random guests that this is where her husband was living. Got to a point where she pissed down the staircase, so security had to get her out and she was banned. Then, friend of mine was delivering towels in the room of a couple. When he knocked on the door, they told him to get in. When he got in there was an old dude getting pleasured from the woman, completely naked and acting like there was nothing wrong. The guy dropped the towels and left quickly. Then, another towel incident. This time, it was just a woman. Friend described to me she was really hot. He went to deliver her towels and she allowed him to come in. He got in and she was in the shower. He says she invited him to join her, but I don't know, so he rapidly left out of embarrassment. And then the worst thing he told me was of 2 Arabic dudes that stayed for a night. The next day after they were done checking in, other guests complained of terrible smells coming from the room. House cleaning went to do a check. There was wine, feces, urine, and blood across the wall, carpet, floor, ceiling, and everything. No idea about the blood because the guys left the hotel and looked very healthy, at least no visible wounds. No one reported any fighting either, and no one was seen going in or out of their room. So where the blood came from is a mystery. When they got back, they were surprised at the state of their room. Camera footage showed that they were the only ones in and out of the room until house cleaning came. Then, they demanded to be upgraded for free to a suite. My friend had to call the manager and she demanded they pay for the cleanup. They would have to charge for the floor and walls or face calling the cops. The 2 guys said they would wait for the cops and kept shouting in the hallway while arguing with the manager. Unfortunately, the manager had to give them another room. Though no upgrade, the hotel is a high-class establishment and the manager was afraid of calling in cops and the continued persistence of these 2 guys. They were still paying customers, so she decided to give them a new room and not pursue the matter further. So, I heard all of these stories years ago, so my memory may not be 100% accurate as to what he told me, but this was the general gist of it. Okay, so we've done a couple of these stories recently, cleaning for other people, delivering to other people, just going to other people's homes or where they rest and relax. When are we gonna have a story where they bang? I know at least one person out there said, screw it, I don't care about this minimum wage job, I'm getting laid, okay? And I want to hear about that story. I don't need all the details, I just want to know what happened. But anyway, next story. So, I work for a 4-star hotel from a pretty nice company doing housekeeping. Let's start. A year ago, during swing shift, I was told to make an occupied room. I knocked and a lady came out only wearing a thong. She told me to go in and clean her room. Her kids, also her husband, all nude. I refused service to them and reported them to security and my managers. Then I have found a lot of sheets covered in blood, feces, used condoms, etc., rooms full of decomposed food, full of bugs sometimes, diapers everywhere. Thank God we don't clean that. And last would be the times people forgot to put their "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. I have got inside rooms with couples having sex or people running naked to get a towel after they shower. In my last job, we would always find drugs, a lot of bags with cocaine, weed, pills. We often had to clean crime scenes, but never got to see bodies. I'm glad I left that hotel. Next story. I walked in on a couple of high school age boys getting dressed. Most of the time I've just seen gross things left behind though. I've found some disgusting women's underwear, bloody condoms and tampons. I've found a lot of drug paraphernalia. I found a banana with a condom over it. The customers had just left, so I told them they forgot something. I didn't want to touch it, and they said it was for me. Next story. I work as the night shift manager. Around 5 a.m. or so, I heard a loud scream coming from one of our buildings. The room in particular is about 100 feet from the office, which is in a separate building. I got up and went to the room where the screaming was coming from, knocked, and the lady hadn't opened up the door, so I admitted myself in to make sure everything was okay. Lady and her husband were on the bed, but the husband was dead. He had died in his sleep, and she woke up to warmth on her feet. Turns out the guy violently crapped the bed when he had a heart attack. 10 out of 10 worst screaming I've ever heard in my life. 9 out of 10 on most disturbing things I've ever witnessed. Next story. My friend is a housekeeper. She usually does houses that are rented out to oil field workers, so it's usually a house full of men. Most of her stories contain dirty condoms, but my favorite was when this guy moved out and kind of tidied up after himself, but forgot/left a bottle of anal freezing cream on his nightstand. Next story. Not a housekeeper, but I think this story is in line enough for people to get it. My first tour in the Navy, I was on the USS Enterprise. During our yard period, where they basically do all of the accumulated repairs and upgrades, we were tasked by our chief to repaint and resurface the desk, floors in one of our spaces. We owned the woman's berthing on the back of the ship and had planned to spend a week redoing it. The first task is pulling everything out, starting with all of the racks, bunk beds. When you have these racks together, a set is typically back to back, and it creates a small space between them. So the first one we free, this bright pink dildo comes rolling out. We all have a big laugh and go about our business. Well, when we reached number 15, we went and got gloves. Then we got a 55-gallon trash can, 132 dildos, vibrators, and butt plugs. What was funny at first just got real gross, real fast. Next story. I posted this a few years ago, but here it is again. I was working at a low-budget motel in a ski town. My shifts consisted of mundane tasks like changing light bulbs, fixing clogs, etc., etc. I got a call from one of the maids to come to a room, though, because the lighting is weird, she said. I asked her to expand on that, and she said that the room just looked strange. Okay, I arrived at the room, and sure enough, the lights are on and the curtains are closed, and the room was bathed in a weird yellow glow. I look up at the ceiling expecting that the bulb is underpowered or the fixture is shorting out, and instead find that the glass globe surrounding the bulbs is filled right to the brim with piss. Someone actually unscrewed the 3 screws holding it up, peed in the globe, and I imagine carefully put it back. The worst part was that the bulb had actually been submerged in piss and had warmed it back up. So the TLDR is, man changes the mood lighting of his accommodation with urine. Next story. About 10 years ago, I was working as hotel utility, fancy term for janitor, on a cruise ship in Hawaii. My job was mainly cleaning spills in the passenger areas and the occasional protein spill cleanup when people got too drunk, which usually happened multiple times a night. One day, though, I get paged by the housekeeping office to take a wet vac to a passenger's room. Norovirus is pretty common on cruise ships, and this poor woman had been quarantined into her cabin and had subsequently had a bit of an accident. When I arrived at the room, I was greeted by the sight of a literal trail of diarrhea. It started on the bed on one side of the room, trailed towards the bathroom, changed direction when the woman realized it was too late anyway, and ended just before the bed on the other side of the room where this poor woman was still laying down, sick as a dog and intensely mortified. I asked if she was okay. She apologized profusely, and I told her to just take it easy and I'd take care of the room. I bagged up the crappy foam pad that we call a mattress and then wet-vacked the hell out of that carpet. By the time I was done, you never would have known she exploded all over the room. Normally, my reaction to such a situation would have been horror and revulsion, but when you're a cruise ship janitor, you become desensitized to human bodily fluids pretty quickly. Instead, I just felt terrible for her. She'd probably been looking forward to this vacation for a while. Then, a day or two into it, she's confined to her cabin, and some random 25-year-old surfer kid is cleaning up her Norwalk craps while she's dying of embarrassment and possibly dehydration. I do hope, though, she eventually got to go onto a vacation that she got to enjoy. If you're out there, room charter lady, Godspeed. So I have to say, I really like and respect OP's approach here. Not a lot of the stories are the people remorseful for exploding their fluids all over the room, but this lady's like, I'm so sorry. He's actually encountering her, opposed to sometimes where they just leave the room as is and then they're gone. He's just like, it's okay. I've seen enough. You just do your thing, lady. Be sick. Feel better, I'm gonna clean this up. So thank goodness he didn't make her feel bad about that or anything like that. But anyway, next story. So, wasn't a housekeeper, but I did work front desk at a crap-tier motel for a while. Honestly, it's hard to narrow it down to the craziest thing I saw there. I'll provide some context for one that sticks out to me, though. I worked weekends at this motel, so I got to witness all of the wild shenanigans that took place outside of the working week. Not to mention that there was a pretty low-quality, albeit popular, bar next door. One Friday evening, I checked in a couple of older gentlemen into their room. It was a DN, double non-smoking. They were incredibly polite and nice. We made idle small talk for close to 15 minutes or so. They went off to their room, and that was that. I saw them Saturday morning bright and early for breakfast in the lobby, all with the same expression on their faces, all smiles and chatting it up with everyone there. This cycle goes on for a few days until Monday morning. It was around 11 a.m. and the two men walked down the lobby where I checked them out of our system and wished them a good journey. Not 30 minutes later, I get a call from the head housekeepers to meet her at the room where those men were staying in. I switched the cordless phone on and booked it up there. The second I get into the hallway, I had a pretty good feeling I knew what had happened. Little did I know. You see, because these old men must have had one hell of a rager this weekend. Because what laid before my eyes was something that I can never unsee. Because as I got closer and closer to the room, the smell of pure, unadulterated crap became more and more repugnant. As the housekeepers are doing all they can not to regurgitate their breakfast, I look into the room and see a string of poo-covered, dripping anal beads ranging in size from about 1 inch in diameter to around 4 inches. And then, there it is. Right in front of the doorway is a layer of excrement, not just a pile, mind you. Oh no, these men left a layer of crap as wide as the door frame, about 2 feet long, and what would I guess to be about 3 inches deep. How I saw the anal beads before the steaming mound of poop, I'll never know, but nonetheless, I was mortified. I'll never forget those glorious bastards. I hope they're still having a grand old time. Perhaps with less poo in hotels, but that crap sucks to clean up. Next story. Worked first shift as a housekeeper at a crappy hotel by the sea. We get a lot of tourists and older people. I've seen a lot of old men walking around in the way too small spa robes. Also, we find a lot of sex toys. Once had a room with multiple condoms in every bin, empty lube bottles, and 2 chicken rings. Then my second shift there, I went to charge a bin liner, and it exploded as I pulled it out. It was full of piss. My sister once had to clean a bathtub that had been filled almost full of piss. A bunch of teenage boys ripped the toilet out of the wall and left weed on the floor everywhere. Finding handprints on the windows and male juices on the curtains in a room was rather funny. Next story. Was formerly guest service personnel for a Forbes 5-star resort. It's a role somewhere between housekeeping and concierge for people with what seems like more money than sense. They have a whole host of cottages, hotels, and more. Highlights of that job role include little old lady would call me all times of the day and night to pick up raccoon leavings, which were really left by her untrained and presumably incontinent ill-tempered hand dog bag. Then asked to bring stoli and strippers to a cottage, specifically strippers and no hookers. He eventually moved on to dominatrixes. Then was given 2 $300 bottles of champagne for my 18th birthday. Was a part of a team that had to clean up after a bachelor party. Found drugs, sleeping sex workers, sex toys, and a goat. And found a dead elderly couple. They died of heat exposure after being trapped in an elevator in their holiday home. Next story. My buddy and his girlfriend got a hotel and she had handcuffs and she cuffed his hands, got the rest of his clothes off and tied his feet. She started kissing his body, and when she got to his face, she looked him in his eyes and said, "I'm leaving you, and I didn't want a huge fight. Room service will hear you or someone will come clean up tomorrow and let you out." Then she put the key on the nightstand. He yelled after her, but she left. He said he yelled for help, but I think they didn't have any neighbors. The next morning, the cleaning lady came in and he begged her to uncuff him. He said his arms were completely effing asleep from being in that position for so long. Next story. I was director of human resources and helped my neighbor get a job at our hotel. This was a huge mistake, but I genuinely wanted to show compassion, and I gave her a second chance at a future. She fought with her girlfriend constantly and asked me for money regularly, etc. So, a position for maintenance assistant came open and I got her in since she had experience with labor and construction. Within the first week of working, she was caught in a guest room having sex with the housekeeper. We even found video surveillance of her making out with the same housekeeper in the stairwells. Immediately terminated. I will never hire someone in good faith ever again. Yes, I'm doing the Bryan Danielson. Yes, Daniel Bryan, yes. You can't see the smile on my face. Somebody got laid in this video. And then they got fired. But you know what? She deserved it. But yeah, I don't have any relevant stories here. I had a friend who worked at an extended stay hotel. Lots of poop and crazy people. Crazy people. I would love to do a video of people who do these things. Like, freaks of Reddit, why do you piss in light bulbs? You know what I mean? Freaks of Reddit, why do you poop everywhere and then leave? Like, I don't know, like those two guys, the smile, I don't know. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching, stomaching through some of this video. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.